The sound of silverware clinking and muted laughter should have felt warm, but all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. I sat there, hands folded on the linen tablecloth, trying to calm my breathing as dozens of eyes turned toward us. Ryan was standing, glass of sparkling cider in hand, smiling that hopeful smile he always wore when he wanted to bring peace to a room. "We have some news," he said, glancing down at me, his eyes soft and proud. "Anna and I were expecting. Our baby is due in March." For a moment, time stopped. Gasps of surprise, the kind that quickly turn into applause and murmurs of joy, rippled through the room. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, sat at the head of the table, elegant as always, her pearl necklace catching the light from the chandelier. For 4 months, I had worn loose dresses, avoided family dinners, and sidestepped her curious glances, waiting for this moment. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would smile and take my hand. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and said, clear enough for every guest to hear, "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" The applause died instantly. The clinking of glasses stopped. My stomach twisted so sharply it almost felt like the baby kicked in protest. A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it must be a joke, but Evelyn's face was stone. She wasn't joking. I froze. Words caught somewhere between my chest and throat. I saw Ryan's smile falter, then harden. Chairs scraped against the polished floor as people shifted, whispering. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," the room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. For a heartbeat, I thought I might cry right there in front of everyone, but some stubborn corner of me refused to give her that satisfaction. I pushed my chair back and stood. "Excuse me," I whispered, though my voice shook, and I walked out before the tears could fall. Ryan followed, calling my name, but I kept walking until I reached the parking lot, cold air biting through my dress. I leaned against the car and finally let it out, sobs muffled by my hands. I had done everything to be accepted, everything, and in one sentence she had crushed it. Ryan's arms wrapped around me. "Anna, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she'd say that." His voice trembled, anger pulsing beneath his calm exterior. I shook my head. "It's not your fault. I can't go back in there." We sat in the car, heater humming, my tears drying on my cheeks. For a while, neither of us spoke. I stared at the dashboard, then at my own hands resting on the curve of my belly, still small but undeniable. "I thought tonight might change things," I whispered, "that she'd finally see me see us." Ryan's hand covered mine. "She will, Anna. She has to. But we don't owe anyone tonight. Let's go home." As he drove through the quiet Boston streets, lights blurring past the window, I sank into the seat and closed my eyes. The question Evelyn had asked wouldn't stop echoing in my head. "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" Like I was someone who couldn't be trusted. Like my love for her son was some kind of scam. The tears returned, quieter this time, and with the memories I had buried deep. I thought of the first time I met Ryan, how simple it had been. A rainy afternoon at a bus stop in Maine, me clutching a stack of nursing textbooks, him holding a laptop bag. He'd offered me his umbrella with that crooked grin of his, and somehow we'd spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. I hadn't expected to see him again, but he found me the next day at the campus library. "Thought you might want coffee," he'd said, holding 2 cups. I'd never dated someone like Ryan before. Smart, gentle, a little shy. He talked about code and algorithms the way I talked about patient care and anatomy. When he laughed, it felt like spring sunlight breaking through clouds. That was 2 years ago, before I ever stepped foot in his mother's immaculate house, before I understood how complicated love could get when family pride was involved. Evelyn had smiled politely the first time I visited, but I could feel her eyes on me like a measuring scale, silently tallying my worth. She'd asked what I did, and when I said I was a nurse, she nodded, but her mouth tightened just slightly, like she was expecting a different answer. We tried, Ryan and I, to bridge that gap. We invited her to dinner at our apartment, sent holiday cards, offered to help with errands. But something in her gaze never softened. It was as if she saw me as a temporary guest in her son's life, someone passing through until he found the right kind of woman. And now she thought I would betray him with our child inside me. The car turned into our street, and Ryan squeezed my hand again. "She doesn't know you like I do," he said softly. "She doesn't know what you've done for me. Everything you saved me from." His voice cracked, and for a moment I wanted to ask him what exactly he meant by saved. But I stayed quiet, pressing my forehead to the cool window. I didn't know then that tonight's humiliation was only the surface of something deeper, a history between mother and son that I had only glimpsed. I didn't know how far back Evelyn's fears went, or how my love for Ryan would be tested before she would finally see me as family. But sitting there, hand on my belly, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't let her words define me, or my child. The night after Evelyn's words, I barely slept. I lay there with Ryan's arm draped over me, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that dinner. Every sound, every whisper, every shocked glance burned into my memory. I couldn't stop thinking, how did we end up here? When did love turn into a battlefield? My mind wandered back to the beginning, back to that rainy day in Maine when my life first shifted. I had just finished my shift at the campus health clinic, drenched in the kind of exhaustion only nursing students know, and the sky broke open as if it had been waiting for me. I huddled under a tiny bus stop roof, hugging my textbooks like a lifeline, when a tall guy in a soaked hoodie stopped beside me. He tilted his umbrella toward me with an easy smile. "You look like you could use this more than me." I hesitated. I wasn't in the habit of taking favors from strangers, but something about his tone was kind, not pushy. I accepted, mumbling thanks, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything from weather patterns to my anatomy exam to the laptop he had built from scratch. That conversation should have ended when the bus came, but instead we sat together, still talking as if we had known each other longer than 10 minutes. The next day, he showed up at the library holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need fuel," he said, shy but certain. That small gesture cracked something open in me. I didn't date much back then, between classes, part-time work, and endless clinical hours. Who had time? But Ryan was different. We grew close fast. I learned he was a computer science major with a talent for solving impossible problems. Someone who thrived under pressure and yet sometimes carried a sadness in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. I never pushed. He had a right to his past and I had mine. When graduation came, I had offers from hospitals in Boston, and Ryan already had a job lined up there at a tech firm. Moving felt like the natural next step, until he said, "There's someone I want you to meet first. My mom." The drive to her house was quiet, the kind of quiet heavy with unspoken warnings. Ryan had mentioned her before, how she raised him alone, worked 2 jobs to get him through school, and still managed to attend every science fair and swim meet. "She's proud," he had said, "and protective. Don't take it personally if she seems guarded." I told myself it was normal. Parents want the best for their kids, right? I wanted her to like me, not just for Ryan, but for us, for the life I could see us building together. Evelyn's house was beautiful, historic New England architecture with white columns and a perfectly manicured garden. She opened the door wearing a cream-colored cardigan and pearls, her posture flawless, her eyes sharp. "So this is Anna," she said, her voice even but cool. I offered a smile and a handshake, which she accepted lightly, as though touching me required effort. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished wood floors, antique furniture, family photos arranged in exact symmetry. I felt out of place in my simple dress and scuff flats, a girl from a small town who spent more time in scrubs than in heels. We had dinner, roast chicken, perfectly cooked vegetables, wine I couldn't pronounce. She asked polite questions about my work, my schooling, my family back in Maine. But every answer felt like I was being graded. When I told her I worked as a nurse, she nodded once, then asked, "Not planning to continue to medical school?" "No," I said, keeping my voice steady, I love direct patient care. Nursing lets me be there with people at their most vulnerable. She said, glancing at Ryan, then back at me. And your parents? They still live in, what was it? Bangor. Just outside of it, yes. My dad's a mechanic, my mom's a teacher. Another nod, another glance at Ryan. No overt criticism, but something in her eyes said ordinary, too ordinary. When dinner ended, she thanked me for coming, but there was no warmth in it. On the drive home, Ryan apologized. She just takes time, he said, gripping the steering wheel. It's not you, Anna. She's particular. Particular. That was one word for it. Another word might have been judgmental. But I let it go. Families take time to blend, I told myself. She would see who I was eventually. Over the months, I tried. I sent birthday cards, invited her for dinner, even asked her to teach me one of Ryan's favorite childhood recipes. She came once, stayed barely an hour, then left early, citing an early meeting. Ryan said she was busy, but I knew better. Still, I loved him, and love meant patience. And then came the moment that changed everything between us. The day Evelyn saw me talking to Dr. Carter at the hospital. He was a senior physician I worked under, occasionally older and married, someone I admired professionally. We were laughing about a ridiculous charting error, nothing more, but Evelyn happened to walk in at that exact moment. She froze, gave me one sharp look, and walked away. The next time we saw her, her tone was sharper, her questions colder. Long hours at work, huh? Must be hard on Ryan. A lot of doctors there, aren't there? You must meet all kinds of interesting people. I understood the subtext. In her eyes, I was the kind of girl who would use a man like Ryan as a stepping stone, someone who didn't belong in her carefully built world. I didn't tell Ryan about that look or about the shift in her voice because I thought I could fix it, that if I just proved myself enough, she'd see who I really was. But now, after what she said at her birthday dinner, I wondered if I'd been naive all along. After that first strained dinner, I tried to convince myself that Evelyn's chill was just a personality quirk. Some people take time to warm up, right? But as weeks turned into months, I noticed something deeper, something that wasn't just about me. It was about what she wanted for her son and what she feared. Ryan rarely spoke of his childhood in detail, but pieces came to me in fragments. A photo of him at 12 with braces and swim medals hanging from his neck. A story about Evelyn working 2 jobs and still making it to every science fair. He told me how she celebrated when he got into MIT on scholarship, how she cried the day he landed his first real tech internship. She did it all herself, Ryan said one night, his voice thick with respect. No one helped her, Anna. She's proud of that. Proud. Protective. Controlling. The words blurred together. I began to understand. Evelyn hadn't just raised a son. She had raised an ideal. Her proof to the world that sacrifice paid off. And in her mind, that ideal deserved, well, someone more polished than me. It didn't help that Evelyn's own history was full of scars. I learned from one of Ryan's cousins, almost by accident, that Evelyn had once been engaged to a man who left her when she was pregnant with Ryan. She never dated seriously again. She says it gave her clarity, the cousin said, that you can't depend on anyone but yourself. I couldn't stop thinking about that. Maybe to Evelyn, I represented exactly what she had run from: uncertainty, risk, vulnerability. And because I didn't come from wealth or status, because I wasn't a doctor or a CEO, I was the risk she feared for her son. But none of that made what happened at her birthday dinner any less brutal. In the weeks after, I replayed smaller moments with new eyes. Like the time she joked that nurses are basically assistants to real doctors, and that Ryan, with his genius, should be aiming higher than someone who takes orders all day. I had laughed it off back then, but now the sting hit fresh. The misunderstanding at work with Dr. Carter sealed her judgment. I should have explained it to Ryan, maybe even directly to Evelyn, but I thought it would only make me look defensive. So I stayed quiet, hoping time would heal it. It didn't. When Ryan proposed, I half expected Evelyn to celebrate, to finally welcome me. Instead, she pursed her lips and asked, "So soon?" We'd been together for nearly 2 years. It didn't feel soon. It felt right. We had a small wedding. My parents, a few close friends, and Evelyn sitting in the second row with a smile so tight it could have cracked glass. I told myself it was fine. That love doesn't need everyone's approval to thrive. But after marriage, the distance only grew. Evelyn rarely visited, and when she did, she commented on everything. The way I organized our kitchen, the way I dressed for Sunday brunch, even the curtains I picked. Ryan told me to ignore it, but ignoring it didn't make it hurt less. Then came the day she saw me laughing with Dr. Carter in the hospital corridor. I still remember her face, frozen, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. She walked away without a word. The next family dinner, she dropped comments like stones. Hospitals are interesting places. So many people working closely together all hours of the night. I smiled through it, but inside I was shaking. She thought I was cheating. The worst part, she never asked. She never gave me a chance to explain. For a long time, I wondered if maybe Evelyn had a right to be cautious. After all, she'd been betrayed before. Maybe her harshness was her way of protecting Ryan from a fate like hers. Alone, abandoned, left holding responsibility for everything. But even if I understood her fears, I couldn't accept her cruelty. And then there was Ryan's silence about his own past. He mentioned once, almost casually, that his college days were a little wild. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. I knew he'd gone through something difficult, something that left him quieter, more focused on stability. Whatever it was, I assumed it was over, irrelevant to us. But on nights like these, staring at the ceiling after Evelyn's accusations, I started to wonder, what exactly had he gone through? What had Evelyn seen in her son's life that made her so terrified of letting anyone in? I think part of me already knew there were layers I hadn't touched yet. Layers that connected Evelyn's bitterness, Ryan's silence, and the look in her eyes when she said, "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" At 4 months pregnant, I thought we were moving into a new chapter, one where we'd finally start healing as a family. But Evelyn didn't see me as family. She saw me as a threat, and maybe she always had. Still, even with all that weight, I kept holding on to hope. I wanted her to see what Ryan saw in me. I wanted her to know I wasn't some mistake he would regret. But hope can be exhausting when it isn't returned. Looking back now, I wonder if part of me knew the confrontation at her birthday party was inevitable. You can't build a bridge if the other side keeps pulling it down. And that night, she didn't just pull it down, she set it on fire. Married life, at least in the beginning, felt like something out of a postcard. Ryan and I moved into a small apartment near the Charles River, with creaky hardwood floors and a kitchen barely big enough for two. But it was ours. I painted one wall a soft shade of sage, added potted plants on the window ledge, and felt, for the first time, like I had a home of my own. Ryan came home from work humming, pulling me into hugs that still smelled faintly of his cologne and coffee. We were happy, at least when it was just us. But there was always that shadow, Evelyn. She visited once after the wedding, walking through our tiny apartment as if she were appraising a property for sale. She didn't mean to be cruel, at least I told myself that. But every word landed like a pinprick. Curtains so dark? Don't they make the space feel smaller? Oh, you're still using that old sofa? Interesting choice. Ryan caught my hand under the table, giving it a squeeze, silently asking me to ignore it. So I smiled, I bit my tongue, and when she left, I sat in the quiet and wondered how many years I'd have to work to finally earn her acceptance. Then came the hospital incident. I had been working long shifts at the private clinic for months, often staying late to cover for short-staffed teams. That day, I was charting notes when Dr. Carter, one of the senior physicians, stopped by to ask about a patient we had both been worried about. He was older, married, with 3 kids, a kind man with a dry sense of humor. We joked about how the patient kept referring to him as the movie star doctor, and I laughed harder than I should have, mostly from exhaustion. When I looked up, Evelyn was standing near the nurse's station, eyes locked on us. For a second, I thought I'd imagined her. She had no reason to be there, after all, but she was real, staring lips tight. Before I could speak, she turned and walked away. The next dinner at her house felt different. She asked questions that didn't sound like questions at all. Busy at the hospital? Long hours, I bet, working closely with doctors must be interesting. Her eyes lingered just a beat too long, and I knew what she was implying. She thought I was unfaithful. Ryan didn't catch it, or maybe he chose not to. I didn't tell him about the look on his mother's face at the clinic because I didn't want to add fuel to a fire I couldn't put out. Instead, I told myself it would blow over. It didn't. The comments kept coming. Small, sharp, disguised as concern. You must be tired, so many hours away from home. Ryan, I hope she's taking care of you too. I smiled through all of it, but inside I was unraveling. I thought maybe getting pregnant would change things. That first morning, I saw the faint pink lines. I cried from joy, not fear. Ryan hugged me and said it was the best day of his life. We sat on the floor of the bathroom, laughing and planning, dreaming of the kind of parents we wanted to be. But telling Evelyn? That felt complicated. At first, Ryan suggested waiting until we'd passed the early risk months, which made sense. Then, as my belly grew, our visits to Evelyn's house grew fewer. She called sometimes, but those calls were always short, perfunctory, asking about Ryan's work, never about me. At 4 months, I started to show, but I chose clothing carefully, loose dresses, long sweaters, anything to keep my body a mystery until we were ready. Ryan said he wanted to tell her in person, on a happy day, not in a rushed phone call. We agreed her birthday dinner would be perfect. I see the irony now, thinking that night would heal the gap between us. In the weeks leading up to it, I still tried. I bought her a delicate silk scarf I thought she'd like, a soft cream color to match her pearl necklace. I practiced my polite smile in the mirror, the one that hid how nervous I was. Ryan prepared too. He wanted that night to be special, wanted to show his mother we were happy, stable, building something beautiful. "She'll come around," he said, wrapping his arms around me as I leaned into his chest. "She has to, Anna. We're giving her a grandchild." I nodded, but inside I wasn't so sure. Evelyn hadn't exactly been waiting for me with open arms. On the night of the dinner, I dressed carefully, choosing a flowing navy dress that skimmed over my belly, paired with flats because heels felt impossible now. I carried the scarf, wrapped in crisp white paper, and told myself over and over, this is the night it changes. This is the night she sees me as family. But as soon as I stepped into that restaurant, I felt the familiar chill. Evelyn greeted me with that same tight-lipped smile, her eyes flicking down my dress just long enough to register the change in my body. I wondered if she knew already, if she had guessed, but she said nothing. We all sat. Food was served, wine poured. Ryan held my hand under the table, gave me a little squeeze, and I knew what he was about to do. He stood, raised his glass, and smiled. "We have news," he said. "Anna and I were expecting." The memory of her response still makes my chest tighten. "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" That night destroyed whatever fragile bridge I had been trying to build. We left the party without dessert, without goodbyes. Ryan was furious, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. "She crossed the line," he said, voice shaking. "I'm done making excuses for her." For 2 months after, we didn't hear from Evelyn. She didn't call, didn't visit, didn't send even a note about the baby. I told myself I didn't care, but at night, I'd sit on the edge of our bed, hand on my belly, and wonder how I'd raise a child in a family split down the middle. I didn't know then that this silence was about to shatter, and not in the way I expected. The restaurant was warm that evening, full of soft lighting and the muted clink of glasses. Guests filtered in wearing their best winter coats, cheeks pink from the December chill. Ryan and I arrived just on time, carrying the gift we had chosen so carefully, a silk scarf that matched Evelyn's favorite pearl necklace. I had spent too long wrapping it, smoothing the edges of the paper until it looked perfect. I wanted no missteps tonight. My dress flowed easily around my growing belly. At 4 months, the curve was soft but undeniable, and for the first time I didn't hide it. This was the night we'd tell her. This was the night I thought everything would change. When Evelyn entered, the room seemed to shift. She wore an elegant black dress with a brooch at her shoulder. Her silver hair swept neatly back. Guests stood to greet her, handing over gifts and warm wishes. She smiled, thanked each person, then turned to us. Her eyes lingered on me for half a second too long, as if measuring what she saw. "Happy birthday, Evelyn," I said, holding out the gift. She took it, nodded politely. "Thank you, Anna. You didn't need to go to so much trouble." We all sat and conversation began to flow. Old college friends, neighbors, work colleagues. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table, giving me that look he always gave when he wanted me to breathe and trust him. I nodded. Halfway through dinner, Ryan rose from his seat, glass of sparkling cider raised. "Everyone," he said, smiling broadly, "I have something special to share tonight." The table quieted, guests turning toward him. "Anna and I," he continued, looking down at me with eyes so warm it made my throat tighten, "we're expecting. Our baby is due in March." For a moment, joy rippled through the room. Gasps of surprise, claps, murmurs of congratulations. I smiled shyly, one hand instinctively resting on my belly. And then Evelyn's voice cut through the air. "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" The room fell silent, as if someone had sucked the oxygen out of it. Forks froze midair. Someone at the far end cleared their throat, but quickly stopped. I felt heat flood my face, my pulse racing so fast I thought I might faint. I stared at her, waiting for some sign it was a joke, some little smile to soften the cruelty. There was none. Her expression was sharp and cold, as though she had simply asked whether it might rain tomorrow. Guests looked at each other, unsure what to do. One woman murmured, "Oh my God!" Another shifted in their chair and muttered something about needing fresh air. Ryan's smile disappeared. "Mom," he said sharply, "that's enough." But I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, rooted to the floor by a mix of shock and humiliation. Finally, I pushed my chair back and stood. "Excuse me," I whispered, though my voice trembled. I walked out of that room on unsteady legs, every pair of eyes following me. The cold air outside hit my face like ice, and only then did I realize I was crying. Ryan caught up to me near the car. "Anna, wait." I shook my head, trying to speak but failing. She said, "that in front of everyone, Ryan." My voice cracked. "Everyone." He looked stricken, his hands on my shoulders. "I'm so sorry. I thought tonight would be different." I laughed bitterly, wiping at my cheeks. So did I. We sat in the car in silence for a long moment. Ryan's jaw tightened, eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel like he could crush it. "She crossed the line," he said finally, his voice low but shaking. "I'm done making excuses for her." I stared out the window at the glow of the restaurant, guests still moving inside, oblivious to the implosion of our family. My hand drifted to my belly, feeling the gentle swell beneath my palm. "What now?" I whispered. "Now we go home," Ryan said. "And we don't look back, not until she apologizes." That night, we didn't hear from Evelyn again. No calls, no texts. For weeks, there was nothing but silence. At first, I told myself I didn't care. I focused on prenatal checkups, decorating the nursery, and savoring Ryan's gentle devotion as he rubbed lotion on my growing belly and whispered to our unborn baby. But at night, when the apartment was quiet, I'd sit on the edge of the bed and wonder how it would feel to raise a child who might never know their grandmother. The memory of her words still stung like an open wound. "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" As if I were some stranger with no loyalty, no love, no right to stand beside her son. I wanted to hate her, truly hate her, but instead, I felt this gnawing sadness because somewhere beneath all that pride and anger, I sensed a woman who had been hurt long before I ever stepped into her life. And yet, no amount of understanding could erase the humiliation of that night. It changed something in Ryan, too, something I hadn't seen before. His patience with her, always unshakable, had worn thin. Weeks later, he came home from work, eyes tired but determined. "Anna," he said, sitting next to me on the couch, "I need to tell you something. About me. About why Mom is the way she is." I turned to face him, heart thudding. "What do you mean?" He took my hands, staring into them as though searching for courage. "When I was in college, I wasn't the person you know now. I was reckless, Anna. I made mistakes, bad ones, and Mom saw all of it." He hesitated, then added, "I think it's time you knew the whole story." Ryan's hands were warm but tense around mine, like he was holding on to something he'd been afraid to release for years. "When I was in college," he began, eyes fixed on the floor, "I lost myself. I had the scholarship, the grades, the potential everyone expected, but I was miserable. I started going out a lot. Parties, drinking, people I shouldn't have trusted. And then one night, I overdosed." My chest tightened. I hadn't known. He had hinted at rough times before, but not this. "Ryan," he shook his head, almost ashamed. "Mom found out everything. She was the one who pulled me out of it, paid the hospital bills, fought to keep me enrolled, got me into therapy. After that, she never stopped watching me, like I was one wrong decision away from ruining my life again. I guess that's why she's so protective, why she looks at people like she's scanning for danger. And then she saw you, Anna. She saw how much I love you, and I think she panicked. Thought history was repeating itself. Thought she had to protect me from getting hurt again." I leaned back, absorbing it. Evelyn hadn't just been cautious. She'd been living in fear, still fighting battles long over. But understanding her fear didn't erase the pain of what she'd done to me. 2 months later, Evelyn called. I stared at her name flashing on my phone, hesitant to answer, but Ryan nodded. "Talk to her," he said softly. Her voice was quieter than I expected. "Anna, could you and Ryan come by this weekend? I'd like to talk." When we arrived, she was standing in the doorway of her home, the same house where I'd once felt so out of place. But now she looked smaller somehow, her shoulders less rigid, eyes tired but soft. "Come in," she said, and for the first time, her voice wasn't cool, it was human. We sat in her living room, silent stretching, until she finally said, "I owe you an apology." Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. "What I said at my birthday party, it was cruel. I can't take it back, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I was wrong." I swallowed hard, the memory still raw. "Why, Evelyn? Why would you think something like that?" She exhaled, eyes glistening. "Because I was afraid. When Ryan fell apart in college, I thought I'd lost him. I blamed myself. I told myself I'd never let anyone hurt him again, and when I saw you, I assumed the worst. I saw a girl who might leave him, betray him like I'd been betrayed. But then I learned the truth. I learned what you did for him." I frowned. What I did? Ryan reached for my hand. "The night we met at that bus stop wasn't the first time you saved me, Anna. Do you remember last spring when I collapsed outside your dorm after that party?" I nodded slowly. I had found him barely conscious, called 911, stayed by his side in the ER until he woke up. "You said it was just exhaustion." It wasn't. "It was the wake-up call I needed," Ryan said quietly. "You helped me turn things around, even when I was too ashamed to admit how bad it had been." Evelyn wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling. "You gave me my son back, Anna, and I repaid you with suspicion and cruelty. I was so proud of surviving on my own that I couldn't see how strong you were in your own way." Silence fell, heavy but cleansing. I placed a hand on my belly, feeling the faint flutter of life inside. "Evelyn," I said softly, "this baby deserves a family that isn't broken." My voice cracked. I don't want them to grow up hearing whispers or feeling like they don't belong. Evelyn looked at me, then slowly moved closer, resting her hand gently on mine. "You're right," she whispered. "If you'll let me, I want to be there. I want to do better." Something inside me softened. Maybe forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it can rewrite the future. I reached out and took her hand fully, squeezing it. "Then let's start now." Ryan exhaled, relief flooding his face as he pulled both of us into an awkward, tearful hug. Months later, when our daughter was born, a tiny, perfect bundle with Ryan's eyes and my stubborn chin, Evelyn was there. She held the baby like she was holding something sacred, tears streaming freely. "Welcome to the world, little one," she whispered. Watching her cradle our child, I realized how much had changed. The woman who once questioned my worth now stood by my side, helping, supporting, loving. Not perfectly, but earnestly. Life didn't magically become easy, but it became whole. And I learned something too. Sometimes people lash out not because they hate you, but because they're terrified of losing what they love. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to build something new despite the wreckage. That night, as I rocked our daughter to sleep, I thought back to Evelyn's question at that birthday dinner. "Are you certain it's Ryan's?" And I smiled, whispering to my sleeping child, "Yes, we're certain of everything that matters."